hello again. Like I said, the Q&A box is on the bottom of your screen. You can go ahead and use that to ask questions to our session host today. Um, Also, I should say welcome to 2025. This is our first session of the year. I'm super excited to have everyone here. I am going to let Amy introduce herself, and then we will get going with the questions. Again, Q&A box is on the bottom of the screen. Thank you.
All right. All right, we getting started now? Good to go. All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name's Amy Whinnett. I'm an actuary. I'm an FSA. I'm actually based in Atlanta, Georgia. I was snowed at home all week last week, so I'm back in the office today. I'm happy to say I work currently working for Atlanta Life Insurance Company. And I've been there for a little bit under a year, but I have got a few years of experience in the industry. Oh gosh, it'll now be 30 years this year since I came into the industry and 20 years since my FSA. So it's been a great journey so far. Lots of different roles. I'm really excited to, talk to you about my experience. But basically I worked several years in the UK, did, a bunch of years working in the pensions industry, then moved over to group benefits, life and disability, worked for some large carriers, reinsurers, consulting, a software company, a startup, a little bit of everything. So hopefully I'll be able to draw from some of that experience to share with you today. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for that intro. I love that you've had your hands in all different areas, and hopefully that can help guide some of the questions from our audience. So I'm going to get started with some questions that we have left over from an event that Amy was previously with us at Georgia State University. So feel free to take your time asking those questions. We're going to go through a few first, and I'm sure that some of these questions are ones that you are also interested in. So, Amy, the first one, if you could just tell us, how did you study for exams? And can you tell us what a passing grade is on those exams?
Okay, yeah. So I studied for exams a few years ago, but it's just like it was yesterday. Um, for me, I was a sort of person who things came really easily to, and probably a lot of you are also like that as well. So I think once you start taking actuarial exams, it's kind of a big wake-up call that you can't cram for the last minute for this type of exam process. So for me, it was a case of starting early, planning, and just really mapping out the whole study plan. Um, I would really get into my my school supplies, One of the things that I always found really a good way of learning is when you're reading, you're writing, you have different points of contact. You're reading it, you're seeing it, and you're writing it down as well. So for me, it was writing those flashcards, and they were the key. And then when it come time to the exam, I would just live with them, and wherever I went, boom, boom, boom. That repetition, I think, was really critical for me. And it was really a case that for me, I had to prioritize it and I had to make it part of my schedule on a daily basis. So I actually I had a small child when I was taking my exams. I had a baby, and I was working in consulting. So very challenging. So it was like for me, I took the train in and out to work, so I'd study on the train. I would make sure I would take a full lunch break and I'd go into a conference room and study. And then, at the end of the night, once everything else was taken care of at home, get that 2 hour window and I would just, do it religiously. And, it worked. And it was funny because it was for me the first exam that I took. And I told this story at Georgia State too. It's kind of embarrassing, but I failed my first exam. I got a 5 on it. 6 was a passing grade, so that was pretty disappointing. Second one, I failed again. I got a 4. I was going the wrong direction, but then I finally got my rhythm, and once I did, it was smooth sailing after that. But so yeah, I for me, with the passing grade of a 6, an ideal was a 7 because you didn't want to study too much for it. Well, you're overstudied, but just getting to that spot where you just felt so comfortable with the material. But yeah, it's a grueling process, but definitely worth it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, especially for sharing that you did fail your first exam. That's typically a question that I get first. I'm surprised it's not in the Q&A box yet. So thank you for sharing that. Our next question is, what made you go into actuarial science?
Well, I was, one of this really good math student in high school, and I was looking into colleges, and I knew I was wanted to do something with math. And of course, the only option I knew about was math teacher. And so when I went to go on college tour, I actually went to college in Worcester Polytech. They have a program there. Back in the day, they had an actuarial science program that geared you for the exam. So they basically told me all about it when I went to visit the college, and I was like, this is perfect, I love a challenge, and I was really good at taking tests too. So that was another thing. And I like doing it. I like the challenge of it. So yeah.
I love that. That
Yeah.
is definitely something. And from your first response as well, the perseverance is super important in this,
Mhm.
in the exam pathway process. So thank you for sharing
Exactly. Yeah.
about persevering, and especially when you said having a small child and working in consulting, I kind of let out a laugh because that's wild. Those are three very challenging things to take on at once. Um,
Yeah.
Thank you. Our next question is again, so for the folks in the audience, these questions came from high schoolers who were watching a panel that Amy had sat on previously. So the next question is, how do actuaries handle and fix errors?
Um, well, we try to, I mean, ideally, we don't want to have errors, but they're part of being human. And that's expected as part of the process. As you may know with actuarial science, like there is no right answer to, so there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing things, and you're using your judgment and assumptions. But when there's something's clearly an error, how is that addressed? Well, first of all, we try to prevent them by having a good, robust review process, making sure that everything that you do is like really well documented. I think that's a really big thing that's really just, you hear so much more about this model governance and being able to, um, you know, trace through the numbers that you're producing and really be able to show the evidence behind it. So when there's an error, the first thing, number one thing is communication. Being upfront about it and coming up with a plan to address the situation and kind of move it forward, going forward. Um, but again, it's one of those things that does come up as part of the review process. And the sooner you find an issue, the sooner you can make people aware of it and address it, the better versus trying to, oh, I made a mistake and I'm going to cover it up because it will potentially catch up with you, especially if you're dealing with other actuaries who are going to review your work. And I think that's one of the things about this profession too, is just our ethics. I feel like we're on a certain level of professionalism that not to say everyone's, perfect, but there is a level of sort of honor in the profession that you are expected under the code of conduct to be able to, you know, share if an error has been made. So yeah, it's just kind of a communication and review process. So I've never made an error, but
Thank
I'm
you. I was
okay.
going to ask, that was my
Yeah,
follow-up
yeah.
question. So thank you for admitting that. I appreciate it.
But if
Thank
I
you.
did, that's what I would do.
I love it. Just hypothetical. Um, okay, so the next question is sort of a three-parter. Where do you have to work as an actuary? Are there remote opportunities? And what are the challenges of the working environment for actuaries? And I can repeat those if you need me to.
So where do you work? Where can you work? And I mentioned probably five, six, seven different things when I kind of introduced myself. So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of opportunities. And then honestly, there's a bunch of areas that I haven't worked in myself. I've never worked as a traditional valuation actuary. I've always been on the pricing side or sort of the innovation side. Um, so the two mainstream paths are insurance companies and consulting firms typically. Um, there also is, and I guess it's kind of where Society of Actuaries, but there's also the paths of going down casualty versus life and health, property and casualty. So those are kind of two separate paths. I'm on the life and the health side of things. So there's opportunities within insurance companies, and then when you're within working in an insurance company, you have the traditional roles have always been pricing, determining you know, what premium rates to charge based on, all your actuarial principles that you're studying. And then valuation, of course, you know, reserving for future liabilities and things like that, financial reporting. So for any insurance company, you're going to have all those actuaries working in those type of roles. Those, I would say those are the like hardcore traditional roles. Over the years, that's really kind of expanded. So we have things like an enterprise risk management function. And so I have spent some time working in that for a large company, doing oversight, over the business units where they have their own actuaries, but we're sort of that other set of eyes kind of overlooking, just checking out for the whole company in general for different risks. That's a really interesting job. There's also data science, which is, that I think that's one where it's kind of interesting because it's kind of there's two different career paths, and actuaries and data scientists have slightly different, different sets of skills, but they intersect a lot. So there's some opportunities there as well. I've also worked in reinsurance, so it's kind of somewhat similar to an insurance company, but it's kind of a hybrid between an insurance company and consulting. On the consulting side, that's a real fast paced, challenging type of role. And that's why when you said that about having, a child and doing exams and consulting, yeah, it's a very exciting, fast paced type of world to be in. It can be challenging if you're taking exams for sure. Um, all kinds of opportunities. So if you're, if you're more of an introverted versus an extroverted type of actuary, there's definitely different types of roles for you. Having said that, though, you're never going to be stuck in a corner working on spreadsheets and not talking to humans, because you will need communication skills no matter what, because you're going to need to talk to non-actuarial people. You're going to need to talk to your peers. So that's like one of the really critical skills that you're going to need. Um, I've worked for a software company, actuarial software company, which was really exciting, very, very different as an actuary, because you're sort of wearing all different kinds of hats. And that was a really interesting role because it was, like I said, it was a startup. There was only five of us. There were like two or three actuaries, and we were building something. So I got to jump in and work. I did some of the sales demos of the software. I did trainings. I did, I built models, and it was all soup to nuts. So like a real kind of challenging job. So if you're like sort of a entrepreneurial kind of person and you like something new and exciting, there are lots of opportunities like that. Also with things like insurtechs, I think that are trying to change the way that they do business, is another sort of era that you can go into that you can, you're not stuck in that traditional number crunching mode, that you're really trying to think outside the box and use your actuarial skills. So um, gosh, there's so many, but that's just a few of them. It's kind of the opportunities are honestly endless, either in the actuarial career. Um, yeah.
That was a
And what was the
very,
other question?
yeah, I was gonna say that was a very
That was the
comprehensive
first part.
um
It might have covered everything, but
explanation. Yeah. So the next one is, are there remote opportunities? And then what are the challenges of the working environment for actuaries? So you
yeah,
did sort of hit on
remote.
those, yeah.
Yeah, remote opportunities there are. I think as we know, the cultures are shifting back quite a bit since COVID. They're not as many, but there certainly are opportunities to work remotely. I think the actuarial profession will never go fully back on site because the skills are too specific to get the talent that you want, and people just are not gonna, no offense, pack up and move to like, Des Moines, Iowa or something like that if they're, like living in Portland, Maine or whatnot. So there is some flexibility, but again, I think it's similar to kind of the way the whole economy is moving right now. Um, it is the type of job you can do remotely successfully, but I think early in the career, it is good to have, and well, throughout the career, it's good to have that face-to-face time. I work hybrid. So I'm in the office 3 days a week and I work from home 2 days a week. And that works out great for me. I get a little bit of both. So, and the other question was on some of the challenge what was, sorry.
I keep I go between Zoom and Teams all day, so I get the unmute button confused. Anyways, it is what are the challenges of the working environment for actuaries? And I think you hit on
Yeah.
that, especially with the introvert versus extrovert. There's always going to be that communication. So if you want to talk a
Yeah.
bit more about that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Like I said, the communication is really critical. Especially when you're starting out in your career because you don't want to be stuck kind of spinning your wheels, as they say. Um, and just being able to kind of speak up and ask questions of your managers and learn things, as you go along, I think is like really, really critical. One of the challenges working as an actuary, I think, is that we sometimes get analysis paralysis, they call it. We can be a tad analytical about things, and sometimes, what you really have to understand is like when good is good enough. When you're kind of put the pencils down, and sometimes that can be a challenge for an actuary who wants to get everything perfect and go into all the weeds. And a lot of times we do things that are challenging for us in our work because we like doing it because it's a challenge. Like, oh, I'm going to build this spreadsheet or whatnot. So just trying to balance the business needs with kind of being able to kind of do the level of analysis that maybe you're kind of inclined to be doing. So I think that's one of the challenges too. So
Thank you so much. Again, that was a long question, so thank you so much for answering all the parts. Okay, this one should be easier. When you were a student, did you have access to study abroad opportunities that were STEM related?
yes, I did. I did have access to that. And I think there are tons of opportunities now, especially. The college I went to, Worcester Polytech, was like that they were all about study abroad and all projects and, obviously STEM, they're engineering school. Um, I personally did not travel overseas when I was in college. However, I happened to marry a British guy after I got out of college, so I moved overseas and I lived there for 4 years. I was in the UK, I was in Scotland and London. So it was sort of my little travel abroad. And I tell you what, having international experience is great for employers. They love to see that because the world's getting so much smaller now too. So anytime you get a chance to get that experience, definitely do it. Yeah.
That's awesome. This is the first time I think that I've actually seen the question specifically about study abroad be asked. So I love
Yeah.
your answer. When I was in college, my school was a small private institution, a small liberal arts institution, I mean, and they really focused on study abroad. I never studied
Yeah.
abroad. I was a STEM student, but I didn't study abroad. But it's really cool to hear that that is an opportunity, and I hope that students take advantage of that.
Oh, for sure.
All right. Definitely have touched on this, but I'm just going to ask it. Has there ever been a time as a student or in your career when you felt like giving up on becoming an actuary, and how did you persist? I think you answered the how did you persist part, but any of that
Yeah.
questioning.
Well, it actually kind of ties in the study abroad or living overseas. So I was kind of maybe, I don't know, a third of the way through my exams when I decided to move to Scotland. And they had that at the time was the Faculty of Actuaries, now it's the Institute and Faculty. So at that point, I didn't know how long I was going to be there. So I decided to start taking exams under their system. And I had to start all over again. So that was a little bit frustrating. And I got through like 7 exams over there. And in 2000 decided just, for various reasons to move back to the United States. And when I came back here, the Society of Actuaries wouldn't give me credit for the exams I had taken. It was like I had basically just kind of I got some professional development credit, so I guess that helped, but basically I had to start all over again. Well, not all over again, but I had to go back to where I was, 4 years earlier. And at that was the point where I was like, do I really want to do this? The funny thing was I spoke to my aunt who was a teacher, and I thought, well, maybe I should be a teacher instead. And she was like, don't do it. She said, don't do it. You won't make any money. Um, y- you know, and I was like, this is what I'm trained to do. I'm like, I'm not going to give it up. So I ended up eventually going through. And so I got my FSA, it was 10 years after, I graduated college, which seems like a long time, but that's kind of because I did it sort of twice. But yeah, I'm definitely don't, but I don't regret it whatsoever. So,
I love that. Thank
best
you so
decision ever
much.
made.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing that. Again, great persistence, and you are persistent, if I can say anything from this conversation. All right. This
You
is,
kind of have to be with these
yeah,
exam
these
program,
exams, yeah,
it's
unless you're
sort of
really, really spot on with math and you can anticipate the types of questions that will be asked.
right.
All right, so this is our last question from the GSU event. What do you think is the most ethical consideration for actuaries today?
Hmm. Well, I think we have a lot of challenges with using data and how we use data, and we have to be careful with it. And this is probably a theme that you see across the board. So we get, you know, policyholder information, we have PII, we have to be careful, that's why we're always doing things like HIPAA training and whatnot. Um, to be careful with the information that you're using because, these are human beings. And yeah, you don't want somebody going out there using your data. So I think that's one thing that's a challenge. The other thing is you can draw lots of conclusions from information, and that's what we do, right? But again, being careful that it's not discriminatory, and that, you know, correlations are all accounted for and whatnot. So I think that's one of the things that really has to be considered when you're trying to assess risk, because that can be very, very challenging and can be, you can open up a can of worms too, if you're discriminating against people and things like that. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. And the other one is probably, we mentioned it before, was how to address an error, and that's just kind of probably a challenge in life, but especially with this profession, people are really like companies, like people's lives. I mean, big economies are like dependent on the numbers that you are producing for them to be successful. So it's really critical work that's being done. So it shouldn't be taken lightly. And it's just something that you have to kind of always kind of be aware of. So yeah.
Thank you so
But
much.
other than that,
Oh, good.
lots of complicated math sometimes. That's another challenge, but that's
That's why
probably
I'm
the
not
fun
an
part.
actuary. I was on the bio side of STEM, so I'm not a numbers
Oh, okay.
person at all. All right, so thank you to our participants who have been very patient. We do have 6 questions so far from them, so I'm going to go ahead and get into those now. What are the qualities and skills needed to succeed as an actuary?
Well, I would say the number one skill that you need above anything, and honestly, I feel like any employer that's smart is going to hire somebody that has this, is critical thinking. It literally does not matter what you know. It matters how you figure it out and what you do with it and how you communicate. So, you know, you are always going to be given imperfect information, and what your job is to take a look at it, see patterns, observe them, fill in the blanks where there's missing information, and be able to tell the story and connect the dots. And another skill that kind of goes along with that is the being able to tell the so what. You'll be asked this in your career. I've been asked it. So what? Like, you just told me a whole bunch of stuff. My boss said it to me last week. You told me all this stuff about this block of business. So what? That's the part that you need to know. Like, what does this actually mean? Because we can get caught in the details. So being able to kind of step back and look at the big picture. And I think some of that definitely does come with time too and experience. Being able to observe things and kind of look at numbers and say, oh, those seem a bit off. Having some kind of expectation about what you think it's going to be, so you have some reasonability, I think is really critical. Um, Personal skills are, and we haven't talked about this really too much. We talked about communication, but just sort of emotional intelligence, how you carry yourself with people, treating people with respect. These are sort of common themes, one would hope anywhere. But it's definitely important in this industry, and it will serve you so well if you're, if you're a nice person, if you're respectful, if you are open to hearing people's ideas, being able to give feedback and things like that. So it's a lot of the softer skills, honestly. I'm just kind of saying this on the assumption that you're passing your exams and you have all the technical abilities, right? There's all that, of course. Um, and that you got to keep sharp, you know, that's for sure. But generally, if you're getting through your exams and you're kind of at that point, you tend to kind of want to pick up new things. We're always learning new stuff. So I am too. So
I really
yeah.
appreciate that answer, especially because we hear all the time, and you've already said it, that being an actuary is a collaborative, uh, it's a collaborative career, and you're collaborating with folks, especially, thinking about consulting. And one thing that I've heard a lot is that you need to be able to translate it for the layperson, because as not a math brain, you can give me all the data you want, but unless you can communicate it. So again, I appreciate that answer. That is very thorough. And honestly, we typically, when I ask that question, I usually get a list of technical skills. So I really appreciate your answer.
Yeah.
All right, next question. What is some advice you would give to someone who's trying to get into the industry?
I would say well, first of all, look into the exams, start kind of understanding the process, and really like see if that's really for you, because I mean, if that's not for you, then it's not going to work, essentially. Try to find somebody in the industry that you can connect with and kind of get their perspective on that. I think that's really helpful. Um, and just like kind of do as much research as you can. And if you're, in school, or actually you don't even have to, I mean, you could be a career changer too. There's still opportunities for internships. So I think those are great experiences. We've got actually two at our company right now. And it's a great win-win where you're getting a chance to kind of test drive the person's skills, see how they fit with the company, and then they can see, do they like the career? Do they like, the type of work that they're doing? And then they can just come out, with a lot more experience and, just be that more, attractive to employers.
Thank you so much.
Um,
I just put a link in the chat for everyone. I don't know how I haven't mentioned this yet. It's the first session from the year, so that's what I'm going to put my brain on. A lot of the skills and a lot of the things that Amy's talked about are actually covered in our free affiliate membership for candidates and folks who have yet to take an exam, so just folks who are interested. I just put that link in the chat. I highly recommend folks, if you're not already a member, to look into that. There's a lot of really great things, including MentorLink, which is a way that there are actuaries who have opted in to being a mentor. And you can go on the platform and find someone to talk to. And so you can do a quick 30-minute session where you can just ask some basic questions, or you can do a longer 6-month relationship where you check in every week, every 2 weeks, whatever cadence you'll choose. And this is a way to talk to an actuary who is willing to talk to candidates and students. So I highly recommend that. Um, ooh, where's my cursor? There it is. Okay. Thank you, Amy, for answering that question. I really appreciate it. All right. So the next question is, how can I stay motivated during the long and challenging journey of becoming an actuary, especially while I'm preparing for tough exams or managing setbacks? So again, you
that is a
alluded to a lot
good
of this. Yes.
question. That's a very good question. Yeah, and life is all about balance. And it can be very, very frustrating. And sometimes you feel like, oh, I have no life. First of all, what I do have to say is if you are going on this journey, you have to have a circle around you that is going to be supportive of you. Because that's really, really critical. I thankfully, my husband was kind enough to look after the baby while I was studying and whatnot. But you need it, having a good support network that understands it. I mean, because especially when you're young and your friends like, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. No, I can't, I'm studying. That's tough. That's a hard, thing to kind of say. So find a buddy, find someone else who's going through it. I also feel like having people who are, kind of also kind of experiencing the same thing, is really good. And that way you get someone to talk to, someone to complain with, someone to, laugh about stuff with. But make sure you give yourself a break too, like in between. When you've got that downtime, go out and live, or even while you're studying too, like make sure you take time for yourself as well. Um, and just you also have to think about it. It's like it's a marathon, not a sprint. So if you get to a point where you've worked really hard in an exam and you just had a bad day, and unfortunately that does happen, don't let that like get you down. Like just kind of try to breathe for a bit and kind of get back at it. I mean, at some point, some people decide they don't want to take exams anymore. And that's okay too. Like there's plenty of careers, that are available for people. You may want to just, or not just, but you want to get your ASA, versus your FSA. A lot of people do that. So it's kind of like knowing your limits, but just really trying to balance it. But if you are taking exams, my hope for you would be that your job as well is going to be understanding it. That's really also, I think, an important thing too. So, yeah, just keep that network of you. The network around you, I think, is really critical during that process. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Keep losing my cursor between two screens. Um, what do you love most about your job?
I just got free lunch today. No, that was pretty cool. What do I love most about my job? And you're gonna ask me why I'm an actuary because I probably don't seem like but I love the people I work with. They're just really an amazing group. They're we're an older company, but we're kind of in a rebuilding kind of startup mode. So there's like a real vibrancy about it. And I love working with people who are not like me, that are the more, the creative, and I'm sort of the more technical. And I love that they value what I bring to the table. So it's really a really cool thing, and it's really nice being respected like that. So, and I respect them. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. That's great. Okay. Our next question. So this is, I'm assuming, so they said they're currently a student at WPI. I'm assuming that's Worcester Polytech. And they're about to graduate and enter the actuarial field. I'm interested in finance and actuarial work. What ways have you seen, I'm sorry, what ways have you seen where people are able to transition from actuarial work to finance?
Okay. Well, first of all, I went to WPI and you heard me say that. So yay. That's great to hear. Um, so the finance and the actuarial worlds I mean, there's a lot of transition going on in there. We definitely work a lot like with the financial planning teams, and like I said, in enterprise risk management, there's some actuarial, but then there's also different types of finance. There is a lot of kind of crossover and a lot of opportunities kind of both ways, honestly. So again, it's like you go down the actuarial path, you're not pigeonholed, so you could become, CFO. A lot of CFOs are actuaries and things like that. Um, so definitely a lot of opportunities on both sides, and there's things like people who are MBAs and, I mean, it's it really opens a door for you, I think. Honestly, like especially with an insurance company, for leadership, and a lot of companies you'll see a lot of like CEOs, they're CEOs of companies or actuaries, and like it's a set of skills that is really respected within the industry. And you kind of once you get to that level, you can kind of like almost wear any kind of hat. Like you see like the head of claims, you can see the head of sales. I mean, it really does give you this like feeding ground for becoming, a leader within an organization. It doesn't necessarily have to be purely actuarial. So, and then most definitely finance is sort of the easiest transition, I would say.
Lots of transferable skills.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Our next question is, what was your experience like getting your VEE credits approved? Did you need to go back to school to complete any courses?
Oh, this shows my age. I didn't have VEE. My first exam was calculus. So instead of having VEE, we basically had to take the exams that covered that all that material. It was last millennium, so it was in the 90s.
I was gonna say, so that is I feel like the move to VEE was probably a positive one, if I could
Yeah,
make that guess. Okay. I'm
it
so
was definitely, yeah, yeah.
so sorry you had to take a calculus exam on top of everything else.
You know,
Um, okay, so the next question is, as a student, how can I improve my skills in simple ways?
um, one, I think, simple way you can improve your skills is to like get feedback from people. I think people are afraid to ask for it and to give it, but to sort of, kind of keep yourself in check. People outside of you can see things going on sometimes better than you can. So I think just don't be afraid to ask and don't be afraid to ask questions. That's for sure. Like, and that's the other one too. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. And just see your wins as small things every day. So if you learn like a little new skill or a little, some formula in Excel for the day, I mean, that's a win. You're building onto that toolkit that you're going to have throughout your career. And it's going to be a very big one, as you go on and you're picking up a little bit, just a little bit every day, one step at a time. I think that's really the biggest key, especially if you're studying or any project,
Yep.
multitasking doesn't always work. So
Yeah, multitasking is not real, unfortunately. I wish.
yeah,
I really appreciate that, appreciate the little wins and achieve the little wins. I think self-validation is so important. And like you said, a small thing every day, one formula, that a win is a win, as folks
yep.
are saying. So thank you so much. This is the last question that we have now. What has made you stay as an actuary until now?
My children, they cost me so much money. Seriously. Um, I'm never bored. I think that kind of summarizes it. Continually being challenged. But not to a point that it beats me down so that it kind of makes me want to learn more and kind of become a better person. Um, and just honestly, like the endless opportunities that there are out there. I mean, I have no idea where my future holds. I've got a few years left in me, so who knows what's next. But yeah, it's just a rewarding career and, in many ways, and there's a reason why it was ranked one, top career. I mean, it really is. Like, if you have the ability and the opportunity to do it, like, yeah, you're a very lucky person. So, lucky, skilled. So yeah, I mean, I don't regret it whatsoever. Yeah, give
Thank
it a
you.
few more years, probably.
And then we'll check back in a few years.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the last two things we have in the chat, one is thanking us and thanking you. So thank you so much. And then we have folks asking if they can connect with you on LinkedIn.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I'll be out there.
There are, like I said, no other questions. So I'll just give us like 30 more seconds in case there's any outstanding
Mhm.
questions out there. Amy, if you would like to put your email in the chat or your LinkedIn handle's not the right word, your handle's your name. Link in there, that'd be awesome.
All right.
And folks, once we get that, I'm not seeing any more questions, so I will give it like 30 seconds to go ahead and copy that down, and then I will close this out. Thank you so much, everyone. I know we had a small group today, but y'all had amazing questions, so I really appreciate that. And Amy, like I said, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
No problem. Now I'm trying to get my LinkedIn. I'm so sorry.
No, it's totally fine.
See about multitasking?
Yeah,
Don't worry.
I do it all the time. That's why sometimes I try to come up with words and I'm reading the next question already and it's not quite working.
Yeah. Well, 1 second. There we go.
Awesome. And let me send it because for some reason, Zoom likes to auto let the hosts and panelists send messages to each other, not to the main group chat. So that is now in
Welcome.
there. Like I said, I'll give it another 30 seconds. But But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And again, thank you, Amy. I know I've thanked you like 20 times already, but we really appreciate it. I really
You.
appreciate it personally. All right, everyone. I see people dropping out, so I'm going to let us go.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.